Okay. One of the great things about actually rediscovering all the software and shit like that is that sometimes you can mess it up. Welcome to the weekend. My name is Brian, and I'm here with a re-debut, I guess, of the One Up Club. Here to talk to you about the FTC and Microsoft decision. Ideally, just so everybody knows, the little mix-up. I have no intro music, no outro music, or anything like that. I lost most of my files over the past several months, not having done any podcasting or anything like that. So big thanks to Pook Ninja and Obi-Wan Jabroni who have been hanging out with me in the chat, talking about Jim Cornette and various wrestling podcasts, and some of the wild things that are going on, talking about some retro gaming stuff. Yeah, so anyway, trying to go straight through OBS apparently does not work, and we were able to discover that. I did a half hour to 35 minutes probably to myself discussing, so my voice isn't always going to be there right now. But I didn't want to kind of talk about this big ruling and stuff like that. So anyway, I've been out for a while. A few updates here as it pertains to OneUp.club and the show that we're going to try to do here on a regular basis. Initially, I was going to do a series of streams, which is still going to happen, but I was going to start it tonight, which I was calling Going Through Gears. And basically what I was going to try to do, because Starfield is coming up in September, so my idea is I've never actually played through and finished any of the Gears of War games, so I was going to try to sort of race through and see if I could finish any of them, because frankly I suck at shooters, so there's a good chance I don't even get through the first one, but I figured one of the beauties of Game Pass and especially the Ultimate plan is that I can just pop it on the PC, I can pop it on the Xbox, I can do whatever I gotta do, and kind of go back and forth and play them. So yeah, that was one of my initial plan was to do that tonight. Start with Gears, Gears 1, and try to see if I could actually get through that. And then, this morning while I was at work, of course, the news broke that the Judge Crowley and the District 9 or whatever court, federal court in California, made a ruling on the FTC versus Microsoft case involving the Activision Blizzard King merger. So that was a pretty big deal. So I kind of forego the Gears of War stuff for the night and sort of dive into that and want to talk sort of about everything that was going on with it. But as I was saying, a lot's been going on here. The yellow walls in the background, it's not a conscientious style choice. What happened is we're moving from the old area where I used to do podcasting, my wife and I. As our kids get older, we start moving and shifting through the house, and the smallest bedroom that we have, we're actually converting to a recording studio of sorts for things like this. But it was my daughter's room, so it's a lovely daffodil yellow, which I can't stand. But we will be making some changes to that as we can, as well as getting a whole new computer system, so I'll have to redo all of this again in a few short weeks. But anyway, as I was saying in the last episode or practice run, I couldn't do any of this without a lot of the friends that we've had from back in the day and even current. And obviously I haven't done a show since the Fat Ninja tribute show. It's kind of rough, and you sort of sit back and you say, okay, well, I haven't done it because life gets in the way, and it does. And there's also that thing where you're like, well, I don't know what exactly to do, how to approach this, because You have all your friends and stuff like that, and guys like Pook and Obi-Wan in the chat room, like they are the guys who just keep doing it and keep going. And Obi-Wan is sort of a bit of a glue. Uh, Pook is probably the more consistent guy. We got Riv out there that we have pretty good discussions with, and he's often out doing his thing. And me personally, I just haven't had it in me. And I've actually felt that, and I had a conversation with my wife where I was like, I need to get back into it, and doing this is actually a part of that process, because the creative side of me needs to come out, and I need to do this, and I need to talk to people and with like-minded interests, which is something I tend to get away from. Too many responsibilities in life and whatnot. So that's what we're going to be doing. I will be kicking in probably starting tomorrow with the going through the gears streams. So we'll pop that in there. I'm going to try to get some of my retro stuff together and get it all hooked up to where we can maybe play a little Outlander and stuff like that from the Sega Genesis, the old Mad Max licensing deal that fell through, but not enough time to actually have the game ready to ship. An interesting little thing on that game, and I picked that up a couple months ago, and it's a good time if you never got the chance to play that on the Sega Genesis. So we'll be doing that as well. But as it turned out, with the breaking news of the day, which we'll talk a little bit of here, this FTC case is very interesting with Microsoft. It was interesting if you've been following it from the beginning. We've had 40 some countries, or 40 even, that were ruling in favor of the acquisition, saying, hey, there's no harm being done here. And the thing is, you can talk legally and kind of analyze it from that, but I'm no lawyer. I'm a laser tech. Or you can approach it as a gamer, and end up being drawn into the back and forth console war type thing. You can be a consumer and look at it through that lens of saying, am I getting what's worth to me as my hard-earned money is spent? You can look at the far future. What's it going to mean? There's a lot to really take from this case, and that's one of the things I find very interesting, and you guys maybe as well. If you actually watched the case as it is going along, there was a lot of reaction, overreaction, underreaction, really amplified the console war kind of mentality that goes on sometimes. And I have a friend who is actually a family counselor by trade, and one of the things that we talk about quite a bit actually is talking about how you have to have a certain level of emotional detachment, and I was asking him about the console war type things, and I was like, what do you make of that? And first he was like, well, I don't really play video games, so show me. So I started showing him a bunch of these tweets, and he was like, wow, people get this invested in it? And the reality is, yeah, we get invested in it. I'm like, it's not just a piece of plastic to us. It's something that we spend our time, all our free time. We invest in that story. We invest in the particular developers, whether it's a Kojima or whoever. And the thing is, it's like, when you do that, it's not just necessarily a piece of plastic anymore. That sucks up the power and drives up your electric bill and forces you to go out there and buy obscure games that you'd never even heard of until you saw it there and you just said, hey, I need to try this. It literally becomes a part of your identity, and if you're not careful, that can get away from you, and that's where you get that console war mentality. And we're kind of getting away from that. I saw an article here today where they were talking about curation of old video games, how almost 90% of all video games from the past are now just gone because they weren't properly preserved. And a lot of these games you just simply cannot find anymore. And while I love Game Pass and in the digital movement and stuff like that, I remember as little as like 3-4 years ago, going on Fat Ninja's show and basically saying, hey, this isn't for me, I need the physical forms. And we're literally coming upon a period of time, an era of video gaming where those physical forms are just disappearing and we can't keep it. And it's, if not for guys like Pook Ninja who goes out there and looks for these things, they're likely to disappear forever because, I mean, we're not taking care of it. And so there's like this whole history that's going on. And while you watch all these people go back and forth about whether the FTC is right or Microsoft is bad, Sony is bad, and all this other stuff, we're dividing ourselves into these lanes, and what we're forgetting is that literally we are in an era of video games right now that while 10 years from now we might not be able to play them because the servers are all shut down, what we have right now is simply an incredible era for being able to try games and access games. And it may be one of the last periods of time where we're able to really dive into some of those Nintendo games and Jaguar or Neo Geo or any of those because they're literally just disappearing. And that's to be of concern if you're a gamer and you want to remain a gamer. However, focusing specifically on the Federal Trade Commission and Microsoft ruling, Judge Crowley came out today and basically dismissed the preliminary injunction and actually moved ahead the temporary restraining order so that as early as Saturday, we could see Activision Blizzard King actually be a part of Microsoft and Xbox Studio. Now, what does that mean? Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. There are literally 7 billion people on this planet and 7 billion perspectives on whether this is good or bad or to what level. And I mean, when you really sit down and think about it, the number of angles that you can look at this case and the result are so great. When you consider, if you want to look short term, tomorrow, next year, the following year, the next 5 years, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference whether or not Call of Duty belongs to Microsoft or an independent Activision. One of the main sticking points for the judge was that Microsoft, in its efforts to acquire this, has committed for a period of 10 years on licensing deals for their titles, and if you're familiar with licensing deals, 10 years is an eternity. Typically licensing deals last 3 to 5 years, or they sell the IP outright. Just ask Sony, who owns the rights to Spider-Man and has forever, as well as the Fantastic Four and so many others. And so those licensing deals, those are simply a result every single time of control. Whoever has the control has the money. And that's where I think that the good thing, at least a good aspect of this deal, honestly comes down to the continued existence of the Xbox gaming division with Microsoft. I have an Xbox. I had the Series X. I had a PS4 and an Xbox One. I just haven't gotten a PS5 yet. But the more options that gamers have as consumers, then the better off we are. That's pretty much the case with anything. If you have a Taco Bell, you want a Casa del Taco. That's just, yeah, I mean, that's the very base level. You want competition. Competition is good. And that was the entire basis of the argument, was that this deal was not an anti-competitive deal. That said, as Riv was sort of saying in a discussion we were having in a chat room earlier, there are things that, if you want to look super long term, not great about this deal. It's stuff that you don't want to happen, which is everything being taken into two different places, and you can either shop at Walmart or Target, and those are your two options. Um, I don't view it as scary, but I view it as something that we need to be leery of, and that's the one thing where what worries me, KFC versus Popeyes, Obi-Wan, exactly. And of course, Apple iTunes and Google Store and all that. I mean, there are so many examples of the duopoly that just do not benefit consumers. We'd love to see as many independent studios as we can, but in order for that to happen, the independent studios have to be supported, and historically they're not. They're just not. The one thing that I like probably most about Game Pass as a subscriber is that I've tried so many games that I never would have even thought about. Like, they never would have caught my eye, including one that in my practice run, I actually, Night Call. Night Call is a sort of murder mystery game where you're a taxi driver on the night shift, and you basically have to essentially interview all of your the people that you give rides to try to figure out a murder, and if you don't succeed, then you're arrested. I never would have played this game without Game Pass. It's off of Game Pass now, so if you go to find it, sorry, you're too late. But literally 2 days ago, I bought it because I love the game. I just like the game a lot. So I went and I spent the $20 on that game that developer, small developer, might not have ever seen. So in that sense, Game Pass is awesome, and it's really good for some of the smaller developers. Now, I know that in order for that to work, they have to have content, and that's, I'm guessing, why Microsoft would go out and purchase them. The ZeniMaxes and the Activisions. In the environment that we're in, which is the reality of all of it, in no amount of anger can actually change that. That is the reality that we live in, where Sony was using their market share to essentially pin down any and all developers they could to either exclusivity contracts or choking out services like Game Pass. So in that, I don't want to say in a condescending way about the adult way of thinking where you disconnect emotionally from the argument. I don't know that Microsoft had a choice but to go swinging for the fences with some of these, because Game Pass will always depend on content. And if they're being choked out for content, then they have to go and secure the content. And I think that's all this was. And I think that the judge in this case actually recognized that, given the testimonies and all of the just all of the evidence and the interviews and everything else. I think that's what it came down to. Exactly. Obi-Wan said he never would have tried Power Wash Simulator if not given Game Pass. And I'm like, you know what? I use a Power Washer enough at work, but I still play this shit out of Power Washer. I don't know why. I don't know why. To me, it's better than Flight Simulator was, because Flight Simulator, I struggled with it. I kept crashing my plane. I'm like, this is dumb. However, I was able to scrub the shit out of that playground. I got it nice and shiny. But yeah, that's where we end up, though. We end up in a situation where these duopolies, it doesn't feel good as a consumer, because all I have is $70 to spend, and where do I spend it? I work hard, and I want to play hard, and sometimes they make it hard to play. These two companies, and there's that part of me that says, okay, well, I don't like this. I don't like where it's going, but it is the reality of the situation, and it is where it's at. Um, so as I was saying earlier, I think the one positive that does come from it is at least Xbox will be around for a few more years. Um, they bought themselves a little stability financially. Um, Now, whether or not they're able to create for themselves, now that they've made these purchases, a constant flow of content for their consumers, as well as Sony's consumers. So when it comes to games like Call of Duty or World of Warcraft on PC or um, friggin' I'm blank Overwatch. I wanted to say Outlaws, Overwatch. Um, that has yet to be seen. I mean, they have to get their schedule down as to release these games, and the games have to work. They can't be Redfall, which you end up with Phil Spencer out there apologizing for it. Um, but yeah, I mean, and what do you do? In a case like this, it's a lot of money changing hands, and I think to the average person such as myself, you see 69 billion and you're like, what the hell? Because I'll never sniff that amount of money. Um, and as Obi-Wan said, this is much about mobile stuff as anything else. The mobile industry, they get like these things here. I mean, so much money goes through those devices that what do you do? They need their foot in that game because at this point they only have something around the lines of 3.5% of the market in the mobile gaming industry. Um, and so they need something that's going to give them a constant flow of cash to continue their existence. Um, but so is it good or bad? Depends. It depends. It really depends on what happens 15 years from now. Because as I said, I don't think in the next 5 years we're going to see much in the way of impact that this deal has. But certainly 15 years from now, we're going to start feeling it. When those initial licensing deals are gone, that's when we'll start to see what this actually means for the industry. Ideally, an organization like the FTC hasn't done more damage than good to themselves by pursuing this case to begin with. If you look at the CMA in England and the European Union and their commission, everything is done differently everywhere. And the FTC here in the States and the CMA in the UK, they're not looking good right now. With the ruling here in the States, the CMA has actually opened up dialogue with Microsoft almost immediately to try to renegotiate a deal that would allow them to be comfortable. And by be comfortable, I mean save face with the international community and the business itself. Because they're putting up with a lot of criticism in the UK, and I know that a lot of regulators there are not happy because it made them look very closed off for business. And after the whole Brexit debacle several years ago, that's one thing that they cannot afford in the UK. But again, how much of that is just Microsoft pushing their money? I don't know. That Microsoft itself has a shit ton of money, money that we'll never even sniff. As I said, but when you're that big, and then there's an invested interest in every country out there to get a piece of that. And the FTC and the UK, they did not make themselves look good in that sense with this case. Now, console warrior fallout, and I think this is kind of fun to think about, because if you actually watched the reactions to each other, this is the part that worries me. As we spoke about a lot with the Fat Ninja tribute show, one of the things that we've always talked about amongst our group is kind of the building of community. And it didn't matter if we were a PC gamer, a PlayStation gamer, an Xbox gamer, or a retro gamer. It didn't matter. We were all there for one thing. We all were there for our unique experiences. We all like different types of game. I'm not a shooter fan, but I'll be damned if I was gonna like not listen to my friends tell me the story about what they got out of the shooter game. Just like maybe they're not into puzzle games like I am, or whatever. My big fear is that the console war fallout from this thing has done a lot to fracture some of the relationships that people have, both with their like Twitter followers and the people they actually game with, um, which runs the risk of pretty much anything. Anytime there's a disagreement these days, which is sad, because in the end of the day, we all want to have shared game experiences and actually just share our gaming experiences with each other. Um, just ask anybody. I mean, if you ever just ask somebody what they thought of something and just let them go, you find out a lot about a game just by hearing somebody's impression of it. And any two people can play the same game and get something completely different out of it. Um, but when you end up with a hot button issue like this Microsoft FTC thing, um, it does more to divide the community than it does to bring them together. So how long is it going to last? I don't know. To a degree, I think that the Xbots and ponies, if you will, are constantly at each other's throats all the time to begin with. But I also think a lot of that has to do with the fact that social media makes it so easy to be that way. Whereas the older generation, like Pook and like Obi-Wan and I, we grew up in a GamePro area where we'd get a magazine once a month and we go and we share it with our friends and go talk about the stuff. That's what made E3 so great, because we didn't know what was coming, because all the information back then was controlled. And now we get the information before we're even supposed to get the information, and we're already making judgments on it and each other, and that's not a healthy way to live. It's certainly not a healthy way for a community to survive and thrive. Um, but in the chat, one of the things they're talking about government officials, and this is one of the things like I had actually mentioned in my practice session. He said the CMA, FTC are just out of touch. One of them asked, do they even need to enter a Microsoft code to play a game? And that was one of the weird questions, because they thought they had to have a product key to play a game, like a Windows product key, like you had to have Windows 11, because apparently they never heard of things like Linux or Mac OS, and it's like they don't know. They've not played these games. They are not experts in the field. While we were out there playing games, they were studying law books. And so they don't understand necessarily the passion involved in the gaming industry, and people that do play, they don't get the industry, and that's one of the things that was kind of brought up and brought to the forefront, because if you paid attention to what people were saying, whether it's a Reddit thread or Twitter threads or whatever, in this case, the FTC, which is a government entity full of lawyers, could not make a case. They made a very weak case. But if you went and you talked or just observed some of the arguments being made by people that were against the deal, there were people making very valid arguments against the deal. More so than the FTC, which is literally spending millions of our dollars in taxes to try to stop this deal from happening. But they could have been beaten by a 21-year-old kid who basically stereotypically doesn't leave his mom's basement because the person has a passion for it and understand the thing that they're actually arguing for or against. And that's one of the things that, like, when you think about it, like, those stereotypes and the fact that people held on to them so tightly, just paying attention to this case, you would see that it wasn't true. It's kind of a street smart versus college degree smart. But that's the thing. With so much information available and so much anticipation and not knowing, I think one of the things that nobody knew what the judge was going to rule, and that was some of the worst interactions I've seen on Twitter in a while. If you go back and forth between the Sony crowd or the anti-Microsoft acquisition crowd, I should say, and the pro side. So yeah, long-term predictions. What does it mean? What does it mean? I think that the 10-year thing is going to go through. By the time the 10-year agreements go through, I think the video game industry as a whole will be vastly different than it is today. And so I think this is going to have lasting implications. The big thing will be, will EA still exist? Will Rockstar still exist? Will Take-Two still exist separately? Will they still be independent, or will they be under some big umbrella, as ZeniMax and Activision now are? We've seen some agreements like PlayStation responding to the Activision announcement by purchasing Bungie, and yet Bungie maintaining full independent control of themselves in that situation. It's very difficult to tell. I mean, that's a strange enough relationship there that they built. And Putin just says he wishes he never had to leave his mom's basement. That's how my son feels right now, as we basically turned our basement into an apartment for him. We just had some plumbing done down there for him today. He'll never leave. He'll never leave our house. But yeah, I mean, think of how different gaming is today versus 10 years ago. With things like constant online, all the digital sales. You don't even have to own a physical copy of a game anymore. You can literally buy a console that only works in digital, no matter what that console is. And that's the thing. So long-term predictions, it will have an impact. There's no doubt that it'll have an impact. Now, what will that impact be? Nobody knows, because nobody knows what the gaming sphere will look like in 10 to 15 years. As Obi-Wan says, subscription model, that alone. I mean, you've got Game Pass, you've got PlayStation Plus now migrating to that type of format. With GeForce and NVIDIA having their own cloud services. We don't know how big cloud's going to get. My personal opinion, cloud's not going to be a thing. I don't see it taking over digital sales at all. I think that the lack of instantaneous data transfer hurts it. So unless we all manage to somehow get quantum computers, I don't think cloud has a chance. Guys in the chat, I'm sure that you'll pipe in one way or the other with the cloud services, because as big a deal as it was made, I don't see it being an issue, because the only time I've ever used cloud has been on card-based games. Games like Scarlet Nexus, or not Scarlet Nexus. Shit, I forget the game. Scarlet Nexus was different. Neoverse, the card-based game, which I loved, but they took it off Game Pass. So maybe I'll pick that up. But I like playing that on my phone. It was a good time. It played great on the cloud and everything else, but you're looking at like a Call of Duty to be on a cloud service, that's going to be a terrible experience. It's going to be horrible. As much as I loved Forza Horizon 5, terrible experience in the cloud. Terrible. And for those reasons, I just don't think cloud's going to be a thing until quantum computers are a thing. However, who can tell? Nobody can tell the future. We can only guess. We can only speculate what we think is going to happen. I think we're clearly going to end up into an overly corporate world across all aspects of everything. That's just the way everybody seems to want it to be. And what do you do if you're a little guy? I don't know. It's a completely different discussion. Obi-Wan likes cloud. And this is actually a great point because he said in the chat, I do like cloud. You don't have to commit to the installation. For me, it's worked. Where I do like cloud is being able to try the game. You just have to look past the cloud's shortcomings and see the game for what it is versus the presentation of the game in that cloud format. Because it's great. And one of the arguments that was made was cloud allows people to play the game while it's installing. So you can just start right away. Or you just give it a shot, see if you like it or don't, and then don't install it if you don't like it. Do install it if you do. It's just a lot of the games that I've had experience-wise, the cloud just doesn't work right. The games that I would like to play, that they run too fast, and the cloud just can't seem to keep up. But that's where I'm at. Is it a good thing or bad thing? My conclusion is, depends on who you are. It really depends on who you are, and what you want. That being said, Pook, Obi, thanks for being in the chat room. I really appreciate it. Having somebody to chat back and forth with and kind of keep an eye on and see what your thoughts are. I'll be trying to get into the stream tomorrow with going through Gears. And we'll see what goes on with that. Because Starfield is right around the corner. And right now, if you can see past all the argumentativeness and all this console versus this console, if you look solely at the games, we have a lot of games coming out in the last half of 2023, and it's going to be busy. So no matter what it is you want to play, whether it's Spider-Man 2 or Starfield or whatever, it's all right there in front of us, and we're actually really lucky outside of the retro gaming community where we're watching things just disappear. There are so many games coming down the pike, and we all need to feel very grateful, which gratitude is sometimes hard to muster. But that's exactly what we should feel, because there's a lot of top-notch games coming last half of 2023 and the first half of 2024. So, yeah, Mortal Kombat 1. I constantly forget about that. Mainly, as much as I love Mortal Kombat, and if you know me, you know that I love Mortal Kombat, I'm almost not looking forward to Mortal Kombat 1. The art direction just looks so crazy to me, and I'm not a fan of the cameo aspect they're going with it, but we'll see. I'll get it. I'll have it day one. I know I will because of force of habit. But yeah, we'll see. But with that being said, Pook, thank you. Obi, thank you. I really appreciate you guys being there for this and for any future installments, and I hope I'm there for the same for you guys. And in the meantime, look for us tomorrow night. I might be moving to Kick as part of this whole experiment, as I try to get some intro outro music and try to get yellow off of my damn walls, because that is hideous. And I hope to have a grand adventure that's a regular thing with you guys, and build this community back up and see what we got going. So in the meantime, on behalf of the guys in the chat room, and with a big thanks to everybody involved, and my wife, who is represented by Odie, not because she's a dog, but just because Odie has a special place in our hearts, with first dates and whatnot. A Cyberpunk, yeah, Cyberpunk. I need to play that one too. I played it at the beginning and got discouraged by how bad I was in the beginning, and they've fixed it up a lot, so I got to jump back into it. But until we get into Gears tomorrow night, thank you. Have a good night. Leave anything in the chat that you like to agree or disagree with, especially if it involves Jim Cornette and podcast. And until then, have a great one, and we're out of here.